Shavkat Rakhmonov defeats Ian Garry via unanimous decision, 48-47 across the board. I think that's probably the right call. However, if it had gone the other way, you couldn't have been upset. You couldn't have been upset. I will tell you, I think the story of that fight, there's two real big takeaways I have from this fight. The first is Ian Garry is very legitimate. He is very good. He is going to be very, very, very good, I think, in due time. He is defensively sound. He is well prepared. He is well studied. He is well coached. He is quick. He makes clever decisions. He's good. He's very, very, very good. I am very, very impressed by him. This was the kind of performance where against a guy like Rakhmonov, and yeah, some of that ability to do well may have come from the fact that they trained together before. I don't know. But nevertheless, he looked like he had a great answer for basically almost anything that Rakhmonov wanted to try. Not totally. There were a couple of the right hands that snuck through in the first and second round or so. Obviously, he got those takedowns late. We'll come back to that. But one of the big takeaways for me is that while he didn't get the judge's decision, and I do think that the better argument is for Rakhmonov 3-2 than Garry 3-2. Nevertheless, Garry really, really showing what he's made of here. This is a guy who I think it was totally legitimate to have some skepticism about what his upside really was. Not because he wasn't beating good guys and beating them pretty thoroughly. Like he beat Neil Magny on his way up pretty thoroughly. He beat Jeff Neal in kind of a ho-hum fight, but, mostly got the job done. And then, of course, the MVP fight was a little, but he got the job done. But if there's a through line from the Neal fight all the way up to this one, it is that he is very defensively sound. He was hard to take down, impossible for Rakhmonov to take down from the body lock or, the clinch along the fence line. He was very good about not giving up his back, even when Rakhmonov was able to kind of throw him by and then get his hands wrapped behind him. He was good about peeling grips. Like, dude, he is very skilled and defensively aware about where he needs to be, how to keep himself safe, what the conditions are under which he needs to, keep the fight moving in the direction that he likes, or at a bare minimum, preventing momentum from ever being built against him. He's very, very adept at that. And that back take he had at the end was super clever off of that same dump that he tried, the trap dump. It's almost like a knee tap, but except instead of coming underneath the arm, you go over the top of the trap. He made Rakhmonov miss on it and then whipped around and got his back and then nearly, I don't know if I'm saying nearly choked him out, but had him in deep trouble in that fifth round before Rakhmonov was able to kind of get 2-on-1 and then spin back into him. But you get the idea. Like, he earned my respect today big time. I was not sold on him after the MVP fight. I was not sold on him after the Neal fight. I knew he was tough to deal with, but he earned my respect with this one. That is a very tough customer that he was up against, and he neutralized him for long portions of that fight. And I think, as someone in the chat had indicated, who brought the other guy closer to the precipice of defeat? It was Garry with that what was it, fifth round, the fifth round rear naked choke attempt that was deep. That was a very, very deep one. Garry is legit. He will be very good. These two will fight again. If there is a knock on Garry, and there must be, and the through line that you can see, not so much in the Magny fight, but definitely in the Neal fight, to an extent in the MVP fight, definitely in this one, Gary's got so much down about how do I take away what you're doing with my defensive action, whether it's we're pummeling in the clinch, whether it's not giving up the back, whether it's, oblique kicks to harass your balance. You can't get anything going. He's got a lot of that dialed in, but he does not have still a lot of firepower, a lot of offense going the other way. And that keeps some of these fights close. At a bare minimum, it keeps them going. In some ways, this looked a little bit more like an Ian Garry fight than it did a Shavkat Rakhmonov fight. Shavkat Rakhmonov fights are a little bit more like the fight he had against Jeff Neal. Now, even that one went a little bit the other, too far one direction, but you know what I mean? Rakhmonov is mixing it up, and he does have vicious ground and pound, and you know what I mean? He's on you, and he's turning you, and he has great submissions, and he'll box you up, and he doesn't care. That didn't look like this for long stretches. There was, again, the fourth round, there was good ground and pound from Rakhmonov. We saw when he finally went to some of those level changes and the takedowns, but this looked a little bit more like an Ian Garry fight than it would for Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I think that's a testament to how well Garry is good at defining the terms of the fight, or, for long stretches of each round. And then over the course of the fight itself, he had good cardio as well. Like he's there from minute 1 to minute 25 the whole way. So if he works on his firepower, and he gets a little bit more going with that, where he can put more strikes together. He's got that jab head kick. He's so fast with the head kick as well. He can go pretty far. But if it's going to be where the vast majority of what he is doing is defining the terms of the defensive sort of battle, then, these fights are going to go the distance, and he might not get the judge's nod every time, like this one, or, he's just going to leave a guy around, and that's going to cost him. So how old is Ian Garry? Ian Garry, as it stands today, is 27 years of age. He just turned 27 in November. Dude, this fucking guy is going to be around a while. He's good. He doesn't take a lot of damage, as you can see. The big issue for him is he's got to find a way to do more damage. He's got to find a way to get guys backing up off of him. He's got to find ways to, like, you go for the takedown. You be the guy that passes. You be the guy that gets on top. Rather than, I'm going to wait for something to kind of materialize. And then sometimes that might work. Again, that choke off the back was pretty decent, but that wasn't until the fourth round. And he arguably lost, since it was 48-47, Rakhmonov lost the fifth, so he won the fourth. And so I guess it was, he took the third and the fifth, Garry. I'm guessing. I haven't seen the judges' scorecards, but I'm guessing he took the third and the fifth. With that in mind, that's Ian Garry's situation. Very defensively sound, really well studied, as I indicated. Very good at making, just blanketing the whole situation and making guys fight on his defensive terms. But the firepower needs to be there. That's not the issue for Shavkat Rakhmonov. Shavkat Rakhmonov has a lot of offensive firepower, but I think there were two problems he really ran into in this particular fight. One is he is defensively a little bit irresponsible. Between the Jeff Neal fight and this one, where he's just kind of walking into range and getting bombed on by Jeff Neal, or in this particular case, reaching and going for the feet of Ian Garry while Ian Garry is cinching up the choke, he got away with it in both fights, but he also got a little hairy in both fights. He's so offensively oriented that he's a little defensively reckless, in my view. And I think I'll look at the numbers here in just a second, but I think that the visuals tend to speak to that. I think the numbers probably will to some extent as well. That's the big issue with Rakhmonov. Well, that's one of the big issues with Rakhmonov. The other one was, now granted, you've got a very, very cagey opponent. He's harassing you with leg kicks. He's harassing you with oblique kicks. He's going side to side. It's hard to close the distance on him. But you saw Rakhmonov kind of trying to throw an arm over just to catch him at times with a big overhand and missing wildly in a couple of cases. He has a bit of an issue closing the distance, I think, against guys who have good movement and are not stationary and are putting something in his face. He likes it when guys come to him and then they duel right there. And if that's the case, then yeah, he's going to beat most of those guys, if not all those guys in that division. If they just meet him in the middle and Rakhmonov has just a battle of my offense versus your offense, he's going to win that battle. I mean, think about it. If it was just Ian Garry's offense, like I'm just going to meet you in the middle and we're going to go, I don't think that fight looks anything like the way that it does. Of course, that's not the way that most guys fight, but I'm just sort of pointing out that's his style of fighting. If you deny that from him, he has a hard time getting out of second, third gear, right? He just doesn't have, well, okay, this is the other part. He couldn't get any of those body lock takedowns because, again, Ian Garry, really, really good job about even when he got out pummeled, and he got out pummeled a lot, you would see him go for something and move his head into the inside space, and then Rakhmonov would re-pummel. Like Rakhmonov was very good about at least having the more dominant position, using the underhook to turn him in. But then you see, and what was it, round 4, he goes for that trap dump, which is like a knee tap. Again, knee tap comes underneath the arm. The trap dump comes over the top. John Jones is very good about the trap dump, right? He'll block one leg and then come over the top and then turn you over. He hit that one and another one, I think a double to get right on top. And you're like, dude, where was this? Where was this? If your A game is not working for that long, why are you taking so long to go to your B game? Which, by the way, looked pretty good. And it wasn't flawless, I think, in the 5th round when he went for some of those. But still, it kept him much more in business. It put Ian Garry on, who, by the way, is a pretty good scrambler, too. It put him on high alert, got him moving. It was much more threatening than anything he was doing against the fence with the clinch in this particular time. I do think he's a skilled clinch operator, but if it's not working, you have to go and do other things. You got to get the guy in motion. You got to drop down to the legs. Like, as I mentioned, Habib is constantly changing levels on takedowns. If it doesn't work for the body, he goes down to the leg. If it doesn't work to the leg, he goes to the other leg. If that doesn't work, he gets behind and wrestles you to your hands. And if that doesn't work, he's switching back and going the other way off the double. And if that doesn't work and you stand, he's underhooking and he's going to hit the Uchimata. Or as he did against, who was the guy he beat up? That was like when, I forget, I don't remember the guy's name. He'll pinch on that same side, weak underhook, and then take you to that side. Habib is able to like mix all of those together pretty nimbly. Now, of course, comparing anyone to Habib Nurmagomedov seems like a little silly. I'm holding that up as like the standard of excellence, but it wasn't like he was even trying that. I think that's my point. It wasn't like he was even going for that. A little disappointing, to be quite honest with you. You have that ability to wrestle, which we saw in the 4th, and then you just waited until the 4th to bring it out, and then you had phenomenal results from it. He had, I don't want to call it what that choke has been normally, but, where he's holding him down with one hand and then pinning his weight into the legs of Garry and then coming on top and then pounding on him. Dude, that was sick. You waited until the 4th to do that when it wasn't working for 2 solid rounds before that? Like, well, 3 really, but I'm saying you waited until the 4th. Why didn't you pull that out in the end of the 2nd or the beginning of the 3rd? You might say, well, maybe he wanted to holster his weapons to see, if he didn't have to go to that, he didn't go to that unless he really, really, really had to. But I'm like, you really had to a while ago. Okay, he was up 2 rounds to 1 heading into the 4th, but you weren't like, it was not a done deal. Like, you still had to do things to this guy. And again, if it's in the 4th round and you're only up 2 rounds, like, of course, like something bad could happen. There just wasn't enough urgency about switching up the strategy when it was important to do so. So the inability to close distance, I think, is going to be a bit of a problem. The lack of, do you want to call it fight IQ? I'm not sure what you want to call it. Maybe he had an injury issue. I think we have to kind of like, sometimes I get on here and I'm like, it's a fight IQ issue. And then you find out the guy had like a terrible injury and then I have to walk it back and I don't really want to do that. So I guess what I'm just going to say is, let's see what he says about this fight after the fight, if there's any kind of issue he was dealing with. But I found that disappointing from a guy who's got that much offense, that many tools, and you're struggling that much and you wait until they like halfway through the championship round to do it. That seems like a mistake. Let's take a look at some of these numbers if we can here. Yeah, perfect. Let me pull this up. I'll show it to you. Let's take a look like this. Just like that. Okay. So here are the stats. Significant strikes, pretty close. 42 to 37. Slight lean towards Garry, which makes sense because he was harassing with the leg kicks. In fact, let's look at the targeting. Targeting here is in the red. Targeting for Rakhmonov in the blue. Look at the leg kicks. 50%. I mean, it was half of everything he was targeting was that versus Rakhmonov, a little bit to the body, no leg kicks whatsoever. Kind of another issue with him. It's like you're fighting a guy in Garry who's going to move a lot. You're not throwing any kicks to his legs to slow him down. Okay. All right. Again, another kind of strategy where it's like, do I think he doesn't have leg kicks? I don't. I bet he does. Diversifying your offense when it's called for is really important. If you're just going to try and like force your game on everyone, yeah, it's going to go pretty far when you're fighting through most parts of that division. But when you get to the top of that division, you got to mix it up and go to other places. And I don't feel like he mixed it up nearly to the extent that he needed to. That being said, you could see some of the targeting here. It all kind of makes sense. Let's look at these rounds. I mean, there was almost no significant strikes in the first round. There was just a lot of clinching along the fence line. Rakhmonov and Garry tied basically in round 2. Gary slight lean in round 3. Rakhmonov, this was the round where he got all the good ground and pound, 2 takedowns in that one. And then Gary getting the 1 takedown, which was kind of more like a back takedown, but yes. And then there's just not a lot of offense there as well. Trying to see if there's anything else here in terms of the targeting. No, that's about it on that one. It's a pretty straightforward kind of case. So, like, where do they go from here? Dude, I don't know where Gary goes from here. Does he take on the loser of Colby and Buckley? Is that a place he could go to? That seems like a possibility. You don't have to rush him. He's already pretty close to the top of that division. Kind of see where it's going to go. Let me pull up the rankings. Let's see what makes the most sense for him, just sort of given the lay of the land. Let's see. All right, so at welterweight, he is currently sitting Gary at 7. You've got Colby at 6, Jack Dela at 4 with Brady also at 4. Rakhmonov was at 3, Usman's at 2. What could you do with Gary? Could you do Gary versus Burns? You could do that. Burns is sitting at 8. Could you do Gary versus Colby? I don't think Colby's going to take it. Could you do Gary versus Brady? Gary versus Madalena? You could De La Madalena, or you could do Brady versus De La Madalena, and then Gary fights the winner or loser of that. There's a few good options for him. That's a bunch of great options for him that you could do. And I firmly believe that, like, you've got a really special kid there. If he can just find a way to turn on the afterburners of the offense, put more of it together, put more volume on these guys, and again, damage them, like hurt them, not just score on them, really, really hurt them. He can do something special in this division. Really, no question about it. If you're Rakhmonov, the answer is pretty obvious. You're going to fight now Belal Muhammad. Folks were asking before we went live for the post-fight show, would you change the way that the odds were? We can look this up. What were the odds? Hold on, I can show it to you. Shavkat Rakhmonov. Let's see what the odds were the first time that fight was announced, because I can look at the odds history. So the odds history with him, they had Rakhmonov. Okay, look, I'll show it to you. Look, they had, it's hard to see here, but it says Rakhmonov and Muhammad. Again, this was supposed to be for this one, and it didn't happen. Minus 210 for Rakhmonov, plus 175 for Muhammad. I think that will change. I think it might flip a little bit. You might get plus 175 for Rakhmonov and maybe 2-ish or high 100s for Belal Muhammad, who has lightning quick wrestling, very good at finding the back, highly experienced, can wrestle for 25 minutes, knows where the fight needs to be for him to win, has a very clear system and tree of offense and what all the little routes he needs to get to the places that he wants to go to ironed in. He knows exactly what he's doing. Rakhmonov just kind of wants to be greeted with other offense, and I don't know if Muhammad's going to fight him that way. So Rakhmonov, for the first time, he gets the win, but he doesn't stop an opponent. The undefeated streak is alive, but the all-finishing streak has come to a close. And if I was him, okay, he was talking about layoffs and maybe some other issues, and that could have played a role. Fair enough. But at the same time, if I'm him, he should really, really, really reflect on this. You don't have to worry about what you're good at. You have to worry about finding ways to apply it more quickly, more nimbly, especially against guys who are not going to greet you with their offense, and making decisions about when to go to second, third order offense when the time calls for it, not waiting too long and managing it into a round. Very, very important. I think Muhammad is a very I thought Rakhmonov would have learned some of these lessons a little bit before we got to today, and it looks like there's still some lessons to be learned for him as well. By the way, how old is Rakhmonov? Let me see here. I think he's 29? How old is Rakhmonov? He is 30. He turned 30 in October. So he's smack in the middle of his prime. There's still some work and development that could happen for him. But he's definitely got some development, I think, if he wants to be champion. He's obviously very good. I mean, there's really no question about it. But if he wants to be champion, this needs to be a learning lesson for him about what needs to be worked on, because I know some of you think that Kamaru could beat him. Certainly you don't want to discount that. I'm less convinced by that, but am I convinced that a guy like Muhammad can beat him? Yes. Jack Della Maddalena is a different one, because Della Maddalena is going to greet him with offense. They're going to meet. And so that is a style that favors both Jack Della Maddalena and Shavkat Rakhmonov. They both just want to meet with their offense. That would be a fun one. That would be a fun one. But Sean Brady is just going to want to wrestle, I suspect. No, he'll strike a little bit, obviously, but he's going to want to leverage that. What does Rakhmonov do about something like that, too, depending if we get there or not? I guess we'll see. So not a bad night for Rakhmonov, but not a great night for his stock as Jason Voorhees and for Ian Garry, who has been the subject of, I should say, the object of derision from the internet's biggest losers. I think can hold his head quite high tonight and really take pride in not a winning performance, but a confidence-inspiring performance to a very strong degree.